Under the dim reflection of her cell window, Luna Nozawa's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the forbidden feed a sympathetic guard had let her see for a moment. The image hit her like a blade. Electra Forrester and Will Spencer, smiling, radiant, standing arm in arm before the wide glass doors of his beach house. The caption beneath was mercilessly simple: a new beginning. Her vision blurred, the world outside her confinement shattered in an instant. Will, the man whose child she carried, the one whose whispered promises had once been her only light, was starting a new life, not with her, but with the woman she had sworn to destroy. The air thickened until it became impossible to breathe. It wasn't jealousy that consumed her first, it was disbelief. How could he? How could he lie so completely, smile so freely, while she endured this tomb of steel and silence? But disbelief quickly gave way to rage, and rage turned to purpose. Luna had lost everything once: her career, her name, her freedom, but she still had the one weapon that had survived all of it: her will. Outside, in the world she could only imagine through headlines and whispers, Will and Electra were making their announcement real. According to the November previews that would soon ripple across the soap tabloids, the two had decided to move in together at the very beach house that had once been Luna's haven. The place was no longer haunted by the shadows of her past outburst. Instead, a spiritual healer had been brought in, burning sage and chanting prayers to purify the air, as if smoke and words could cleanse blood, betrayal, and memory. Will stood by, uneasy, watching Electra act as though this performance of purity could erase what Luna had done that night: the shouting, the shattered glass, the moment her grief turned violent. For Electra, this ritual was a victory lap, the declaration that she had survived Luna's madness. For Will, it was an attempt to forget, but the house remembered. And so did Luna. Bill Spencer had not hesitated to approve their decision. In his mind, his son deserved a fresh start, and Electra, polished, calculating, and hungry for influence, fit perfectly into the Spencer image. He had never trusted Luna's passion, her rawness, her refusal to fit neatly into the family's social design. To him, Luna was a problem that had solved itself the day she was taken away in handcuffs. He had no idea that his approval was kindling in the hands of a woman who now had nothing left to lose. Bill saw the move as an assertion of order. Luna saw it as an act of war. That night, when the guards dimmed the lights, Luna lay awake in her narrow bed, one hand over her stomach. She whispered to the child inside her, or perhaps to the illusion of one, because even she no longer knew what to believe. The pregnancy that had once been her salvation, her proof of love, had become an unbearable uncertainty. The baby wasn't developing the way it should. The doctors had hinted at complications. And yet, in her mind, it was still a living bond to Will, the proof that he could not abandon her completely. She told herself that if she could just get out, if she could stand before him and remind him of the life growing within her, he would come back. But deep down, beneath the layers of delusion, a darker thought began to whisper. What if the baby was never meant to be born? What if its only purpose was to drive her to the brink, to force her to confront what she truly was when love was gone? As the weeks stretched on, Luna's desperation grew into action. Every sound in the corridor became part of her plan, every passing guard a possible accomplice. She began watching, learning, memorizing routines. She had already bribed one nurse for pills she could use to fake an illness. Another inmate, drawn by her quiet intensity, agreed to help her stage the episode. She needed to be transferred to the infirmary. From there, escape was possible. The idea of freedom no longer frightened her. It was inevitable. She would walk out of this place, and she would end what had been started the moment Electra posted that smiling photograph. Meanwhile, in the beach house by the sea, Will and Electra were living inside the illusion of calm. They cooked dinner together, took staged photos for lifestyle blogs, and told each other that the world's approval was all that mattered. Electra thrived in the glow of attention. She had always needed an audience to justify her existence. But Will's smile often faltered when no one was watching. He told himself he had made the right choice, that Luna's instability, her violence, her obsession, had forced his hand. Yet sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, he could almost hear her voice echoing through the hallways, reminding him of the things he had once promised. When Electra brushed against him, he flinched. She didn't notice. She was too busy planning their next post. A love built on peace. She would caption it, unaware that the woman she had replaced was clawing her way toward them. Luna's plan succeeded sooner than anyone expected. The infirmary transfer went smoothly, the fake seizure convincing enough to draw attention away from the unlocked window she had noticed days before. By the time the guards realized the escape, the rain had already erased her footprints. The next morning, news of her disappearance broke across every network. Luna Nozawa escapes psychiatric custody. Steffi Forrester, who had once tried to mentor Luna in her early fashion career, read the headline with a sinking heart. She had seen the warning signs long ago, the obsession with Will, the fixation on revenge, the way Luna's love could turn into something terrifyingly pure. Now Steffi feared she might become part of Luna's delusion again, especially since Luna had once used her photo as a target during therapy sessions. But Luna's sights were no longer on Steffi. There was only one name that mattered now: Electra. As Luna moved under cover of darkness toward the coast, every memory returned like a wound reopening. She saw the night Will had first told her he loved her, the way the ocean had swallowed their laughter, how she had believed that the stars themselves were bearing witness to something sacred. Then she saw Electra, perfect, polished Electra, standing at the launch party months later, whispering into Will's ear while Luna watched from the crowd. That moment had been the beginning of the end. Every betrayal since had been an echo of that night. Now she imagined confronting them, imagined the look of fear on Electra's face, the guilt in Will's eyes. She wanted them to understand, to feel even a fraction of what they had made her endure. Back at the beach house, the air began to feel wrong. The spiritual cleansing had done nothing to dispel the unease that settled over them. Electra laughed it off, claiming it was energy residue, but Will felt the truth, the calm before something irreversible. That night, as they celebrated their move with champagne and dimmed lights, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. He closed the blinds, locked the doors, told himself it was paranoia. But outside, beneath the same window where they had once watched the waves, a shadow moved silently. Luna had arrived. The confrontation didn't happen all at once. It began as a haunting. Luna entered the house through the service door, the same one she had used countless times when she still lived there. She walked through each room as though reclaiming her life. Every photograph on the wall mocked her, Will's arm around Electra, the captions about new beginnings. She picked one up, stared at it until the glass cracked beneath her grip. Upstairs, laughter echoed. She followed the sound like a hunter. When she reached the bedroom, she saw them, Electra draped across Will's chest, the flicker of candlelight dancing on their skin. It was the image that had haunted her dreams, now made flesh before her eyes. For a moment she couldn't move. Then something inside her broke. Electra was the first to sense movement. She turned, startled, and met Luna's gaze through the mirror. The scream tore through the house, shattering the fragile illusion of peace. Will leapt from the bed, shock freezing him in place. "You can't be here," he stammered, but Luna's eyes told him the truth. She wasn't here to talk. Her trembling hands held a weapon she had stolen from the infirmary guard. The gun looked almost too heavy for her, but her grip was steady. "I loved you," her silence said, "and you buried me for it." What happened next would be whispered about for months, dissected by fans and tabloids alike. Some would claim Luna fired first, aiming at Electra. Others would insist that Will tried to grab the gun, that the chaos was an accident. But the truth was simpler and crueler. Luna hadn't come to kill, not at first. She had come to force him to choose. Between the woman he loved now and the woman he had destroyed. Between comfort and conscience. But in the heat of fear, Electra lunged forward, trying to knock the weapon away. A struggle, a flash, and the first shot rang out. The bullet shattered a lamp and grazed Electra's arm. Will shouted her name, lunging to pull her away, but Luna had already fallen to her knees, shaking, horrified by her own loss of control. The gun clattered to the floor, but in the next instant, Electra seized it. Her eyes were wild now, not from fear but from fury. "You ruined everything," she screamed, though no one would remember the words clearly later. The second shot came almost without sound, as though the house itself refused to echo it. When the smoke cleared, Luna was on the ground, blood staining the silk rug she had once helped choose. By the time emergency lights painted the sky red, Finn and Steffi had arrived, summoned by Will's desperate call. They moved through the chaos like ghosts, helping paramedics lift Luna's limp body onto the stretcher. Will stood apart, his face a ruin of shock and guilt. Electra sobbed into his shoulder, already weaving her story for the cameras that would soon arrive. But Finn's eyes stayed on Luna, on the faint rise and fall of her chest. She wasn't dead, not yet. And somewhere, perhaps deep in that fractured consciousness, she might still believe that she had won, because the truth, once again, was hers to tell. In the days that followed, the headlines were merciless. Luna Nozawa attacks Will and Electra. Ends in tragedy. Pregnant ex-lover shot after break-in. Talk shows debated her mental health. Commentators painted her as both villain and victim. Bill Spencer issued a statement calling for compassion but privately told Will to stay silent. Electra became the tragic heroine in the public eye, her bandaged arm the perfect symbol of survival. But behind closed doors, Will could not escape what he had seen. The way Luna had looked at him before the gun fell, as if she still loved him, as if forgiveness had been within reach. At the hospital, Luna drifted between worlds. Machines kept her alive, but her mind roamed elsewhere, through the corridors of memory, through the beaches of what could have been. She dreamed of the child that might never be born, of the man who had never really belonged to her, of the life that had been reduced to headlines and whispers. In that dreamscape, Electra appeared again, but not as an enemy. She was a reflection, another woman trapped in the same storm of ambition and desire, both of them victims of a world that turned love into a weapon. When Luna finally opened her eyes, the world was different. The ocean was still outside her window, but she could no longer hear it. She understood now that freedom wasn't a place or a person, it was the moment she stopped needing either. Her body was broken, her name ruined, but something inside her had survived. She had faced the truth of her love, her rage, her madness, and found that all of it came from the same place, the unbearable need to be seen. In the end, Will and Electra's beach house would remain, the symbol of everything that had been lost and gained. People would drive past it, whispering about the night Luna returned. Some would say she came for revenge, others would say she came for redemption. But the truth, like the sea that forever erased her footprints, was more complex. She came because she loved too deeply, because she could not let go, because sometimes the line between devotion and destruction is too thin to see until it's already broken. And so the story of Luna Nozawa became a cautionary legend in the world of the bold and the beautiful, a reminder that passion, when left untamed, can consume everything in its path. In the flickering twilight of that November week, 3 lives were bound forever by one night's madness. Will, haunted by guilt, Electra, scarred but victorious, and Luna, the ghost who proved that love, once betrayed, never truly dies. The ocean would keep her secret, as it always does, whispering her name with every wave that touched the shore, reminding those who dared to listen that sometimes the most dangerous kind of love is the one that refuses to end. Beneath the relentless hum of fluorescent light, Luna Nozawa sat motionless, her hands folded in her lap like they belonged to someone else. The prison's air was heavy with disinfectant and despair, yet her eyes, sharp, glimmering and frighteningly lucid, burned with something far more potent than madness. They called her delusional, unstable, unfit for the outside world, but what they didn't understand was that Luna's mind wasn't broken. It was awakened. She had inherited the dark genius of her grandmother, Sheila Carter Sharp, a woman whose very name conjured both fear and fascination. The Forrester family had tried to erase that legacy, to rewrite history as if DNA could be diluted by good intentions, but blood remembers what it must. And in Luna, that blood was stirring again, patient and calculating, waiting for its chance to strike. It all began with one act of arrogance, a guard named Stoll, a bureaucrat too comfortable in her role, deciding that a little gossip wouldn't hurt anyone. She had shown Luna a social media post, a careless flick of her wrist that would unravel everything. The post showed Will Spencer and Electra Forrester standing together, smiling before a real estate office, the caption bright and cruel, "New home, new beginnings." Stoll thought she was offering Luna closure, maybe even catharsis, but what she handed her instead was gasoline. The sight of them, his arm around Electra, the same man who had once sworn he'd wait for her, lit something infernal within Luna. It wasn't just jealousy. It was betrayal in its purest, most corrosive form. To her, this was proof that the world outside these walls had moved on without her, that her suffering was a private theater no one cared to witness. The officials who called her dangerous didn't see the danger forming in silence. They mistook stillness for submission. Luna was learning, studying every weakness around her, every door that creaked too loudly, every guard who lingered too long, every camera with a blind spot. Her cell was no longer a prison, it was a classroom, and her teacher was rage. The world might have branded her a criminal, but she had always known how to adapt, how to mold chaos into clarity. It was her inheritance, the twisted gift of the Carter bloodline. The irony was almost laughable. On the outside, everyone thought Luna was a lost cause, a failed echo of Sheila, a woman destined to crumble beneath her obsessions. But in truth, Luna was stronger than any of them realized. Like her grandmother, she had the ability to transform humiliation into weaponry. She had been shattered, yes, but in every shard there was reflection of the people who had used her, the institutions that had condemned her, the love that had betrayed her. And she would make them see what they had created. Even those who thought they had escaped her, like Will Spencer, could not truly rest. Will was trying to rebuild his life, crafting an image of calm and success. In public, he spoke eloquently about redemption and growth. In interviews, he thanked his father for his guidance, his mother for her compassion, and Electra for helping him find balance. To the world, they were the perfect couple, the son of a media titan and the heiress of the Forrester empire, bound by beauty and wealth. But behind those photographs, Will's conscience was eroding. He had convinced himself that Luna was just a dark chapter, a youthful mistake he had to move past. But memory doesn't obey reason. At night, he still dreamed of her voice, still felt the weight of her absence pressing against his chest. He had moved into a new house, yes, but the walls carried whispers he couldn't silence. Electra, for her part, thrived on the illusion of control. She had always been drawn to power, and Will was her most prestigious acquisition yet. She told herself she had saved him from Luna's madness, that her love was a balm against his scars. But deep down, she knew she was competing with a ghost. No matter how tightly she held him, there was always something unfinished in his touch, something unspoken in his eyes. She blamed Luna for that, for existing, for haunting what was hers. Bill Spencer, ever the strategist, supported their union with a businessman's pragmatism. He saw in Electra a reflection of his own ambition, sleek, ruthless, and politically convenient. She elevated the Spencer name, reuniting two powerful legacies in a marriage that promised dominance in both fashion and media. To Bill, Luna had been a liability from the beginning, too emotional, too unpredictable, too human. He had manipulated the justice system once to protect his empire. Doing it again would be nothing new. The corruption ran deep, and Luna knew it. She had seen it firsthand during her trial, the government officials exchanging glances, the whispered deals, the selective mercy. Tom Starr and Paul Hollister had died because of men like Bill Spencer, and yet justice had bent itself into an apology for power. Luna understood then that she was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting a system that rewarded deceit. Her crime, the alleged attempt on Liam Spencer's life, had been exaggerated, twisted, made to fit a narrative that kept the Spencers untouchable. She had screamed her truth in court, but truth meant nothing against legacy. Now, months later, in the dim corridors of her confinement, Luna began to see the pattern for what it was. The officials didn't care about morality, they cared about alliances. The same corruption that freed the guilty could also, perhaps, free her. If Bill could bend the law to save his own, she could find someone willing to bend it again, this time for her. And so she began to plan. She watched Stoll closely, studying her habits, her fears, her quiet greed. Every person has a price. Luna only had to find the right currency. Stoll wasn't corrupt at heart, not yet. She was simply careless, unfulfilled, the kind of woman who mistook kindness for control. But Luna saw through her. She knew how to turn pity into persuasion, to make her captors feel like saviors. She began by showing remorse, crafting stories of personal redemption, confessing regrets that sounded rehearsed but looked sincere. Stoll, flattered by the apparent transformation, loosened her guard. She began to treat Luna less like a prisoner and more like a patient. That was the first mistake. Meanwhile, Luna's name continued to circulate outside the walls. The tabloids speculated whether she would plead insanity at her upcoming hearing. Some journalists called her a fallen angel, others a monster reborn. To Luna, these labels were meaningless. What mattered was that people were still talking. Attention was power, and in that power, she saw her path forward. One evening, during a medical check, Luna encountered another inmate, a woman known only as Yamada, whose mind wandered in cryptic fragments of truth and delusion. Yamada had once been notorious for manipulating her own release through fabricated illness. She had spent years perfecting the art of playing both victim and villain. Luna listened carefully as Yamada spoke of hidden diagnoses, sympathetic doctors, and forged psychiatric reports. It was in that moment Luna realized she didn't need a breakout. She needed a loophole. If Stoll was her gatekeeper, Yamada was her mentor. The two women formed an alliance built on desperation and intellect. Luna began feigning symptoms, night terrors, memory gaps, voices that weren't there. She allowed herself to unravel publicly, while privately rebuilding every thread of her plan. The staff began whispering that she was deteriorating, that prison life had finally broken her. That rumor spread like smoke, and soon, a proposal emerged: transfer her to a medical facility for evaluation. It was the same method Sheila Carter had once used decades ago to slip out from under the system's thumb. Blood remembers. But even as she plotted her escape, Luna's thoughts returned to Will. The part of her that still loved him was the same part that demanded justice. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to punish him or save him, perhaps both. Her heart ached with contradictions, rage and longing, vengeance and nostalgia. She had imagined him 1,000 times, sometimes reaching out to her in forgiveness, sometimes laughing at her from afar. In every vision, Electra was there, the catalyst, the thief, the mirror of all her insecurities. Will, however, was unraveling in his own quiet way. The guilt he carried was not about betrayal, but about complicity. He knew Luna hadn't been entirely guilty. He had seen the evidence buried by his father's lawyers, watched as testimony was altered and files disappeared. He had done nothing. His silence had purchased his freedom, but it had also condemned him to a lifetime of doubt. Every time Electra smiled at him, he felt the phantom weight of Luna's gaze. By late November, as the ocean winds grew colder along the coast, the lines between fate and choice began to blur. Luna's transfer papers were approved. Stoll signed them herself, never realizing she had just opened the door for her own undoing. That night, as the van rumbled down the highway toward the medical center, Luna's hands were free of cuffs. She looked out through the small barred window at the horizon. The world was still out there, unchanged, indifferent, but she was coming back to it. And when she did, She would not beg for acceptance. She would demand recognition. The question that haunted everyone, both on screen and off, was simple. Was Luna truly insane, or had the world around her gone mad? The answer, as always, was both. The corruption that freed the powerful